and welcome to Guilfordian Reviews. I'm Nick Butinsky.
And I'm Mitchell Hamilton.
Today we'll be reviewing Paul, the new sci-fi comedy from Superbad director Greg Mottola. The film is written by and stars Simon Pegg and Nick Frost, the comedy duo behind Edgar Wright's Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz, as well as the beloved British sitcom Spaced. Other cast members include Seth Rogen's voice, Kristen Wiig.
Paul tells the story of two English sci-fi fans who wander around the western United States viewing famous UFO sites, such as Area 51 and the famous Black Mailbox. During their adventures, they happen upon a real extraterrestrial who is in need of their help. After dealing with the initial shock of coming into first contact with an alien, Paul reveals to our protagonist, Clive, played by Simon Pegg, and Graham, who's played by Nick Frost, that he is trying to get back to his planet before the government captures him again. Deciding that this adventure is more important than their trip across the western United States, the three of them set off to get Paul home, even at the cost of being hunted by the few religious nutjobs and some pretty dangerous government agents.
Which is surprising.
Sure. You an alien?
To you I am, yes.
Are you going to probe us?
Why does everyone always assume that? What am I doing? Am I harvesting farts? How much can I learn from an ass?
Well, what?
I'm sorry. What's your name?
It's Graham Willie.
And what's his name?
That's the writer, Clive Gollings.
Okay, cool. I'm Paul.
Paul?
Yeah, it's a nickname that stuck. My ship crashed on a dog. It doesn't matter. Look, if you don't help me, I could die on this road tonight.
Okay.
Okay, perfect, great. Okay, help me grab him. This man's peed his pants.
It is, for the most part, just as relaxing as it sounds. There are a few sentimental and even dramatic moments, but honestly, entertainment is the primary focus throughout most of the film. The hard work that Pegg and Frost put into making the audience laugh really pays off. Even as the movie comes to a sloppy close, the general ideal that Paul expresses is a self-reflective one that really sums up the entire experience of watching the movie. Life is about trying to enjoy yourself as much as possible. And thanks to some very good acting and some hilarious writing, a lot of viewers are likely to do that.
Ultimately, the film for me was akin to cotton candy. Sweet and enjoyable while it lasted, but ultimately of very little substance. But on the topic of Paul the character, I enjoyed that though he was the title character for the film, he wasn't the main focus. Instead, we focused more on the relationship between Nick Frost and Simon Pegg, which, as you mentioned in some of the early works that they've collaborated on, I felt has been probably one of the best parts of those films. And once again, we get that same sort of relationship, but now it's reached a new stage. Instead of being, action cop characters like in Hot Fuzz, or just kind of two drunken friends that they were in Shaun of the Dead, here we have maybe a more sensitive role. It's where they talk about the constant jokes about them being gay, but they're this more emotionally connected.
Minutes of gay panic jokes gets a little tiresome pretty quickly. Frost and Pegg have had great success being hetero life-mates in other films, such as Edgar Wright's Shaun of the Dead and Fuzz, but in Paul, they play that card a few too many times. Furthermore, the jokes genuinely seem like they're rather shoehorned into already funny situations every once in a while. In any scene where religion comes up, it's almost too caricatured and immediately bashed without any sort of back-and-forth dialogue. In a move that's reminiscent of Seth MacFarlane, Pegg and Frost seem to write Paul for a very specific sect of geekdom. Atheists and agnostics, with a penchant for references as jokes without punchlines. The name-dropping of sci-fi films is pretty entertaining, especially if you're familiar with the movies that they're talking about, particularly on the grand scale, since Paul is an homage to all of these films to begin with. But if you aren't familiar with them, or you haven't heard of any of them, for instance, Mac and Me, I'm sure that got passed over by a lot of viewers this weekend, it comes across really as more of a haphazardly thrown-in reference for the sake of a reference.
And you were talking about some of the gay jokes earlier, the religion jokes. Well, and I feel like it's fair to connect it, or make it an analogy to Seth MacFarlane, but I feel in this case, it's a little more tasteless and tactless.
It is.
Especially with Paul and the constant joke that Nick Frost and Simon Pegg are gay, particularly when he did the pantomime, homoerotica. That was a little much for me.
The probing jokes every
30
15
seconds
minutes get really frustrating.
Yeah.
Honestly, the tactlessness gives it its own level of tolerability, and that's kind of what makes it endearing. But at
Because
the same time,
it's Seth Rogen, and they kind of make the character out to be brash and tasteless anyway.
exactly, and flamboyant in that way.
And it kind of works because it pairs off well with the very British sort of nature that Simon and Nick bring to their characters, where they're very nice, they're very proper, even though they're nerds.
Exactly.
They're very polite and soft-spoken, and every American character in the film just kind of looks askance at them, particularly the rednecks at the beginning.
Yeah, Pegg and Frost really come across as just a skew of straight man status in this movie, with
Yes.
Rogen being the inevitable funny character, the Poochie, if you will, in this movie.
And then when we get the female love interest, that sort of bromance that we've been talking about gets even more highlighted, because for that first few minutes after she's introduced and there's the romantic tension building up towards the end of the second act, you see that Nick gets jealous, and there's that scene of Paul and Nick sitting in the RV and talking about it, where he's jealous that now Simon has a new object of his affection in his time.
I'd say you should go see Paul if you like a lot of sci-fi references.
Particularly a really good one at the end that I won't spoil for anyone.
Some awkwardly phrased profanity.
Agreed. If you like the interactions between Simon Pegg and Nick Frost in their previous works,
Seth Rogen generally being himself.
and women with 3 breasts,
A recurring theme that gets much funnier as it goes on, actually.
Oddly enough.
Yeah. Overall, I would give Paul 3 to 5 pooches. Paul just isn't for everyone. It's aimed at a pretty specific demographic, and even those that fit into it might find the plot a little rougher than they would like. But despite being a little bit sloppy, Paul brings a touching and hilarious sincerity to the screen. The wonderful actors make it a joy to watch, and it's clear that's because, for them, it was a joy to make. Unfortunately, Paul falls just a little bit short of being the homage it set out to be.
I'm going to give it 3 out of 5 slave layers, for a similar reason. To me, it's sort of a send-up to a lot of sci-fi tropes. I mean, at the beginning, we see the two of them introduced going to a convention. So that right there should tell you the kind of audience that this movie is appealing to, like you said. And I feel like it wants to do, for sci-fi, what Shaun of the Dead did for zombie films and Hot Fuzz did for cop dramas. It doesn't have the magic that those two did. Now, whether it's because Edgar Wright wasn't directing, or maybe, some part of the writing with Simon and Nick, I don't know. It just didn't last afterwards for me. I didn't think about it, like I do the other two, and it doesn't get referenced. It's just overall not as enjoyable a film.
Paul is certainly funny, but it's just not as rich and compelling as the other comedies that Nick Frost and Simon Pegg have
Agreed. It's a movie I'd take a few of my geeky friends to. We'd watch, we'd laugh, and we'd make fun of the inaccuracies, and the little side jokes that are put in the film, like Mac and me.
If you like sci-fi comedy flicks, Paul might be right up your alley. Well, I hope you'll join us next week on Guilfordian Reviews.
Live long and prosper, Guilford.